Hello and welcome to the Driver of the Weekend video for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the video in which my data algorithm decides the Driver of the Weekend based on many different factors. Now I have changed the way that this algorithm works and scores the drivers overall. I'll pop a link to that video in a card in the corner. But to give a small brief overview, there are 30 main categories that this algorithm looks at across practice, qualifying and the race. Roughly 50% of them take a look at performances versus your teammate, and the other 50% look at performances against yourself across the whole season. There are then various weightings applied to each category, how far you progress through the weekend, how well you perform, etc. And then there are weightings placed on each individual session as well. Then near the end of this video, we'll be comparing my data algorithm ranks to my opinion ranks that I made on the race post Sunday, and then also your guys' average audience ranks as well. So without further ado, we will now jump on into the Driver of the Weekend video, and we just briefly take a look at the practice Driver of the Day. Now this only accounts for 2% of the overall Driver of the Weekend score, so it's not particularly relevant, but it's interesting to note that Gasly had a storming practice sessions, whereas Bottas did not. But quickly moving away from practice and taking a look at qualifying. Now, the three drivers that have scores of 0, Ricciardo, Stroll and Giovinazzi, that is because they crashed. If you crash, you just straight up receive nothing. I don't have any sort of sliding scale, as that starts to introduce any sort of bias towards particular types of crashes and particular types of incidents. If, however, it is a mechanical failure rather than a crash, you will receive 10 instead. So a sort of middle point. These scores go up to a maximum of 20, which is the best, and a low of 0, which is the worst. So back to the qualifying driver of the day, it was Lewis Hamilton, by some margin as well, over Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc. Then Mick Schumacher pops up there, with also George Russell ahead of Lando Norris and Kimi Raikkonen. But interestingly, the two Red Bulls had a sort of iffy ranked qualifying, according to all of the data. Then from qualifying, we next take a look at the race driver of the day, and these are some pretty low scores with a high of 12.7 out of 20, and that goes to Pierre Gasly, then Mick Schumacher, then Max Verstappen. Fernando Alonso had a very strong race, as did Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen and Lance Stroll up until his retirement. Now, the reason why Stroll receives a score and other people who also retired slightly earlier on is because there is race data to take a look at. Same with Esteban Ocon, who did score 8.1. The drivers, however, who retire on lap number 0, where there is physically no race data to take a look at whatsoever, then they will receive 0 for a crash and 10 for a mechanical failure. Now there is a new category that I've added in for the race and qualifying, and this takes a look at where the car should be as well. So this takes the percentage pace difference, things that I calculate in my race data analysis, and then it predicts where the car should be based on that order, and then it plots it against where the car actually was during the race. Hence why Valtteri Bottas is so far down. They have the second best car on the grid at the moment as of round number 6, so their car should be in positions 3 and positions 4. However, he was all the way outside of the points, down in positions 14 or something like that for the majority of the Grand Prix. But then from the race driver of the day, we take 2% of the practice scores, we take 28% of the qualifying scores, and we take 70% of the race scores that are on screen. We add all of those together, and we end up with the driver of the weekend. And that was given to Pierre Gasly by 0.6 above Mick Schumacher and then Lewis Hamilton. Then comes Kimi Raikkonen, Fernando Alonso, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Russell, Vettel, Norris, Tsunoda. And then interestingly, Perez was rated very far down in the bottom 5 for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Which, when looking at the data, this does actually sort of make sense, as the whole weekend he was behind Max Verstappen. He was never at any point really ahead or very quick versus Max Verstappen. Whereas if we take a look at his individual performances, he actually did okay in some of the categories. But bear in mind, Red Bull do now have the fastest car as of round number 6. And he ended up winning the race. That's exactly where the car should be. And for a large portion of the Grand Prix, he was also P2. where the car should be. So in these categories, he did not score very well. But now comparing those data algorithm outputs to my own opinion ranks as well, and also your guys' average audience ranks for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. On screen now is the ordered data-derived ranks, which puts Gasly P1 and then Bottas in P20. Then coming up in the middle here is my opinion ranks that I made in the video on Sunday, where I put Vettel and Gasly joint P1, 19 out of 20 overall, and then Bottas all the way down at the bottom, 2 out of 20 in P20. However, you guys, the audience, the average ranks here, they weren't as high scoring as I was expecting. You put Vettel and Verstappen at the top, with Gasly in P3, but slightly lower points than I was expecting. Then there was a big steep drop off to people like Charles Leclerc and also Lando Norris. You put Yuki Tsunoda in P7 above Alonso, Raikkonen and also Hamilton, who you put slap bang in the middle. And then lots of people. We had Carlos Sainz, Daniel Ricciardo, Mick Schumacher and Nicholas Latifi, who all received an average rank of 10.2, but we all agreed that Valtteri Bottas had a crap weekend. But now taking the scores from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and adding them to the 5 previous races that have happened so far this season, and we get the season orders for the data-derived ranks, which puts Max Verstappen in P1 across the whole season so far, out of a possible 120 points. So he scored 83.8, then Lando Norris is extremely close to Charles Leclerc and Kimi Raikkonen, who are joint on 73.3. And Lewis Hamilton has slipped just a little bit down to P8 across the season as a whole. And then comparing this to my summated opinion ranks, that has also put Max Verstappen as P1, Lando Norris as P2, but I still have Hamilton as P3 with Leclerc close behind in P4. And then summating all of your audience ranks, you guys have Lewis Hamilton still at P1, and then it's Max Verstappen in P2, Carlos Sainz. Very interestingly, all of your summated ranks has put Carlos Sainz in P3 above Valtteri Bottas. You have scored Bottas very, very highly so far this season. Then Esteban Ocon in P5, Lando Norris P6, and then Charles Leclerc in P7. But interestingly, there are no real lineups, really. We have a lot of people, sometimes similar. We've got Verstappen in the top couple of people. We've got Hamilton in the top couple of people, apart from the data ranks. And then it just sort of changes so drastically. Now, of course, there is no official rankings for any of these drivers, but it is interesting to see that across 3 different metrics, there are 3 completely different sets of results. But there we go, there is the end of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix Driver of the Weekend video. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of today's data and also where you think the drivers should have been ranked. But that's all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.